All right, everyone, thank you for joining Workshop Wednesday. Today's topic is going to be college letters of recommendation. We host these workshops every Wednesday with weeks that don't have a modified schedule. So next week we will not be meeting, everyone's on spring break, and then we'll come back to school and pick it back up where we left off. Okay, so college letters of recommendation, often referred to as LORs, or you'll see the abbreviation LOR, and that's what it stands for. I'm Ms. Duran. I'm over at Los Altos High School, and Ms. Yazdani, my counterpart at Mountain View High School, also joins these events, and she'll be hosting the next workshop, which is covering planning for your summer activities and planning for your summer. So I just wanted to remind everyone that on April 1st, we hosted the Countdown to College event, and the video recordings and resources are available to you online. There is a site, and I'm going to drop this into the chat, that you can open up and maybe take a look at when you have a chance. So that's a site with a lot of resources. And then we also have the YouTube channel playlist for the Countdown to College information that we provided to students and families. So you can go ahead and check that out when you get a chance. Okay, how do I, sorry, 2 seconds. I should not be in the chat at the same time as I'm presenting. Okay, so back at it. Those two links are now in the chat, and today's the letter of recommendation workshop, and we'll have Q&A at the end. So let's get started by discussing what types of college letters of recommendation. Generally speaking, there are 3 types of college LORs. The first one is written by your school counselor. They also produce something called the secondary school report. So sometimes when you're researching colleges, you'll see counselor letter, or you'll see ask your counselor for a secondary school report. Both of your counselor can do both of those things, and each high school has their own process. I believe Mountain View shared their process at the Countdown to College event, and Los Altos High School will be giving this information to students this spring, which will give them an opportunity to look over what's required to get that letter and to have the secondary school report completed. You'll have time over the summer to work on that, but you'll also have time in the fall to finish it up or work on it if the summer is completely packed. But the idea is that we want to give students the information early and give you a lot of time to work on it, or to get ahead and plan your summer and plan your fall so that you can avoid unnecessary stress. The second type of letter of recommendation comes from a teacher, or it's an academic recommendation. And that's what we're going to really be focusing on today in this workshop. And in Naviance, which is the tool that both Mountain View and Los Altos High School uses for submitting letters of recommendation, there's a 2-teacher sort of limit on how many letters can be sent out through Naviance. And so that's just something that's going to come up, but maybe you could take a note of that now. And then the third type of letter of recommendation is an optional or a supplemental letter of rec. And that can be academic, but it won't be sent through Naviance. So really the focus there is more on if you have a coach, a mentor, or maybe an employer who can write you a very strong letter of recommendation that will shed light in a way that is not going to be found in either the counselor or the teacher letter. I would not recommend asking for an optional or supplemental letter from a person who, maybe you worked with for a few months, you did an amazing job, but there was nothing truly exceptional about it. In some cases, a letter that's lukewarm or great, but not shining some significant amount of different light doesn't help your application, and it can detract from other components of your application. So you do want to be thoughtful about who you ask for if you're going to pursue an optional or a supplemental rec. And that's definitely something you can talk about on a one-to-one basis with either Ms. Yazdani or me, or with your academic counselor, to see if it makes sense to ask that third person or not. Okay, so like I said, we're focusing today on the teacher letters of recommendation. There's a bit of a chicken or an egg situation here. If you are planning on applying to some private or out-of-state colleges, it is likely that you will need at least one teacher letter of recommendation. That might not be true for everyone, depending on what colleges are on your list. Now it is April 7th. You might not have a working college list at this point. Hopefully you have a couple colleges on your list. You've started going to those virtual college fairs. You've gone to a couple college visits that have been hosted through our various school sites. And maybe you've liked a few and you've added those to your college list. But your list will likely continue to change. You'll be adding more as you do more research or as you discover new schools or programs. And what you want to be looking at is the requirement for each of those schools. But if you've done nothing for college research, just know that if you're applying to private or out-of-state schools, it is likely that you will need at least one teacher letter of recommendation. At the most, you'll need two required. And also you want to be thinking about your college application timeline. If you missed the fall session, we had a session on when to apply. So we went over early action, early decision, regular decision, restrictive early action, rolling admissions, and you can find recording of that session on the YouTube channel. So if you go to the YouTube channel and you look at playlist workshop Wednesday, you can find the application rounds, when to apply, and just refresh your memory on what all that means. But if you need a letter early, then you want to ask your teacher significantly earlier than that deadline so that they're ready to submit your letter and you're not feeling stress about coming up across a deadline that you didn't anticipate. So your college list and when you apply does factor into this letter of recommendation conversation. Then the second reminder is that as you research these colleges, you're making a note of what their letter of recommendation policy or requirements are. If you don't have a spreadsheet, I have a great template that you can use and I can share that with you all later. But it's basically which college, there's a few more columns that you can customize based on you. And then there's a column for saying, what is the letter of recommendation policy? And you can start seeing, one required, two required, none required, optional, all of those things. And you can make a note and stay nice and organized. And now is the time to start researching and taking action if you haven't already. So for all the juniors and anyone younger in the classroom, it's never too soon to start researching colleges and adding those to your list. But if you're an 11th grader, it's really like no more delaying. Now is the time to start taking action. And you want to use Naviance. This will help you stay organized. You're going to end up needing to use it your senior year. So you might as well start now. And I will later in the presentation do a review of Naviance. Okay, so just to give you 3 different examples of different colleges and their policies. So the first example is American University. This is universities in Washington, D.C. What I did is I went onto their website, I just Googled American University, and then I went to undergraduate admissions, and then I clicked on how to apply. And then under how to apply, there was an option called application checklist. And that is what you're looking at right now is a screenshot from the application checklist section of the website. And so what you can see is they tell you how you can apply. You can apply via Common App or Coalition App. Just so you know, juniors, you can create those accounts now. You do not need to wait. You can, again, create those. Just remember your username and password. Then they're saying you need to submit an application fee. You'll need a high school transcript that will be sent by us in the fall. You'll need test scores, if not test optional. So you need to review the test optional policy at American University. And then it shows there at this second red arrow, teacher recommendation letter. So American University does require one teacher recommendation. And then it also asks for your guidance counselor or school counselor to complete the following. So also a letter of recommendation from your counselor, the secondary school report, which I mentioned at the top of this presentation, and then mid-year report, mid-year grades as soon as they become available. That is your first semester of senior year grades, and those get sent out in February of your class of your 2022. So mid-year is halfway through your senior year. Once your grades have posted, your counselor will send those to certain schools and also indicate if there have been any changes to your academic record. This is also slightly covered in our application rounds conversation. If you are a student who has amazing grades up to this point, it might benefit you to apply early action or early decision because you're already a super strong candidate. If you're a student who maybe had a little blip in the road, or maybe you're trending upwards and you want colleges to see your first semester grades, that's when applying regular decision and then showing them your first semester senior year grades could be an advantage for you. So again, rewatch that video and you can absolutely ask us questions to see what situation or what application round might make most sense for you. Okay, so the second example is MIT. MIT is a private institution, highly selective in Massachusetts. And so on MIT's site, you go on there and you look at MIT undergraduate admissions. I have the link there. And it has a specific page just for letters of recommendation. They have a specific page for several parts of their application. And I really like this as an example because it gives you super clear, they tell you exactly what they're looking for. So it says MIT requires 2 letters of recommendation from teachers. 1 recommendation should be from a math or science teacher, and 1 should be from a humanities, social science, or language teacher. And it does also talk about, you can ask a teacher who has taught you in an academic class in high school. This would be a teacher who knows you as more than just a student who does well on all tests. Now, that does not mean that you and this teacher, your teacher was a club advisor, or that you have a common sense of humor, or you read the same types of books. They just want you to be able to say more than, this student has never missed a question on a test in my class, period. That's not enough. They want to know other information, which we'll also cover later in this presentation. But the big takeaway here is they break down what they consider math or science evaluation potential subjects. So you could see math, biochem, physics, earth science, environmental science, computer science, engineering, technology, science, research as a class. So it really breaks it down for you. And then same for the humanities section. You can see English, history, foreign language, classics, economics, government, psychology, social studies, or geography. Any teachers in the humanities umbrella would also count. So just to pause here really quickly, when you're a 9th grader in high school and you are talking to your counselor about picking classes and possibly what you want to do after high school, the approach is always, let's try to leave all of your doors open. Let's try to give you all of the options in case you don't know. And then that way you won't have your choices closing doors before you've been able to make that decision. If you're a student who is not quite sure what your college list exactly is going to look like, but you think you might be applying to private or out-of-state schools, the general recommendation is you can ask a teacher from the STEM fields and a teacher from the humanities, because that's going to be sort of the most specific any college is going to want, and then you have your bases covered. Now, if you are applying to a program that requires an audition, like performing arts or visual arts, they might have a different requirement, such as an art teacher or a music teacher that you've worked with. So just pay attention to that as well. But again, the generic recommendation, maybe 1 from the STEM fields and 1 from humanities. Okay, and then example number 3 is the University of Colorado Boulder. And this image is drawn from a Common App account. If you are a student here today who has created your own Common App account, this will look familiar to you. If you haven't done that yet, and when you do, this is what you'll see. So I used my test account and I had added University of Colorado Boulder. If you go to their website, it automatically refers you into the Common App account. So you'll have to create one. I happen to have one. So I clicked on it, and what you'll see is in Common App, the portal, it'll show you the university's name once you've added it, it'll give you information up here. You'll indicate when you're applying. And then down at the bottom where you see the red arrow, it shows you what the recommendations are required. So a school report, remember that's coming from your counselor, final report also coming from your counselor. And then it's saying teacher evaluations, 1 required and 1 optional. So again, if you've asked 2 teachers, which is sort of what the recommendation is at the max, they'll both be sitting in Naviance, and both of those teachers can submit for University of Colorado Boulder. Okay, so again, you can create a Common App account now. You can create a coalition account now if you want, and then you want to be adding all of these colleges also in your Naviance list, because you will be using Naviance, and that's how your teachers will be sending your letters of recommendation, and your counselor will send your transcript. And then the next picture, this was me just zooming in really closely, also from the Common App information. It just says the University of Colorado Boulder requires 1 academic letter of recommendation, which may include either a counselor recommendation or a teacher evaluation. And so again, if you've asked 2 teachers and your counselor, you will be clear for the University of Colorado Boulder. But this is the type of language we're talking about when we say you want to check each school that's on your list and be crystal clear on what their letter of recommendation policy is. Okay, so this is a pop quiz. We have not talked about it yet in this workshop, but it has come up in other places or other times. And I just want to get a sense of if people know the answer to this. So the first question, do the California State University campuses, all 23 of them, do they require or accept letters of recommendation? So you could do like a thumbs up, or you can just mentally answer the question. If you want, you can put it in the chat. But do the CSUs require or even accept letters of recommendation? Okay, so everyone's got it in their mind. The answer is no. They do not require or accept letters of recommendation for the CSUs, all 23 of those campuses. So if you're only applying to CSUs, then you do not need to, you can leave now. It's great to see you. Thank you for coming, but you don't need to request a letter of recommendation. And then the second question is, do the University of California campuses, all 9 undergraduate campuses, require or accept letters of recommendation? So do the UCs, any of the 9 campuses, require or accept letters of recommendation? Okay, so you're thinking that your answer, so the answer is no, with one exception, which is UC Berkeley will, by invitation, ask a very limited number of students or allow them to submit a letter of recommendation, an optional letter of recommendation, but you can't request that they request a letter from you. There's no way to actually be able to send that. It's just UC Berkeley will sometimes ask certain students if they would like to submit a letter of recommendation, they can, and that will be factored into their decision, but you really have no control over that, and it's optional, so it's not required. One more caveat to this is if you are a first generation or low income student and you're applying for something called EOP, that is a program that will help support you while you're in college. They will ask for a recommendation. So just know that that's not to be admitted to the college. It's for a program once you have been admitted into the college, and that asks for a letter of recommendation. I think sometimes students get confused by that. So EOP has also been covered. If you have questions about EOP, please reach out to either Ms. Yazdani or me, and we'll be happy to talk about it with you. It's also on both of our Google sites. You can read more about EOP at the CSU and UC level. Okay, so again, just a quick reminder, if you're not sure and we're just going super generic, think about one STEM teacher and think about one humanities teacher. Colleges want to see this from the 11th grade, somebody that's taught you in 11th grade. And we know that you were mostly virtual this year, and you were also virtual for half of 10th grade if you're an 11th grader right now, but your teachers still have had an opportunity to observe your work, your intellectual ability, and your connection with others this year. So ideally it would be 11th grade. If you have a unique situation, we can absolutely talk about it and go from there. But again, these are the generic recommendations. Okay, so I would like you to do a quick brainstorm activity with me. And this is about you thinking, who might you actually ask? And maybe you're on the fence. So okay, brainstorm activity. How might your teachers respond to these questions about you? So I'm going to ask this question. If I were to ask your teacher, what are the first words that come to mind for you? What do you think that they would say? What would the teacher immediately think of when they think of you? Do you imagine? And then I want you to take that one step further, and I want you to think, what words would you want to come to their mind, and do they match? So let's say you think your teacher would say that you are hardworking, but you also want your teacher to say that you are a team player. Have you demonstrated your ability to work well in groups up to this point? And if you haven't, is there a way for you to try to highlight that in the next couple of weeks to really like go above and beyond to show that you're also a really strong team player? And the answer could be a yes, it could be a no, but just keep that in mind. What do you think they'd say today, and what would you like them to say? And is there a way to bridge that gap? Okay, and then number 2 is, with the ratings section, what are your strengths and what could you improve on? And I will show you on the next slide what this is talking about. But just in general right now, you can think, what are your strengths and what are your areas that you could improve on? And that sometimes can make a very powerful letter, because the teacher could say, oh, the student struggled at first doing this one specific thing, but then they came to see me during office hours, or they got some extra tutoring, they maintained a positive outlook, and they persevered, they persisted, and now they've mastered that concept. So you don't necessarily need to think of a teacher or a class where you've never had any struggle. It could actually be beneficial to have a teacher talk about how you overcame a challenge or how you faced a challenge and persevered. And then the third thing is, what are concrete actionable steps you could take to improve in the course? And then what are the actions that you can take now to shift what comes to mind for them? So maybe you've been, and no pressure right now, but maybe you've been camera off all year, and you're thinking, hey, this is the teacher I really think could write me a strong letter of recommendation. Could you turn your camera on during class time? Or could you authentically go to office hours and talk about a project that you've been working on, or something interesting that's come up in class, just to, again, make that extra step effort. And it's worthwhile to go through this, even if you have a good idea. Just take a minute. It can't hurt to walk this through before you make your decision on who you're going to ask. At the bottom there, the college essay guy, has a ton of great resources. I love his work. And so there's an interesting blog on how to ask for a letter of recommendation that I recommend that you look at. And this activity is actually one of his activities that I'm happy to share with you all today. So again, it's not too late to start showing up more powerfully in class this year. And it's a reminder, the teacher letter of recommendation is the only place in your application where the admissions officers will actually hear from somebody who has taught you in the classroom. Your essays show how you think, they show your perspective, your transcript shows your overall academic record. Your counselor will put you in the context of school. They'll give a little bit more insight and overview, but your teacher, that's not where they need to learn about all of your activities or necessarily your passions. You really want your teacher to be talking about how you are as a student in their class. It might come up that something that you do in class also really relates to an outside passion or interest, but that's not necessarily the case. So colleges really do want to hear, how are you as a student? How do you think? How do you perform? How do you engage? And your teachers is the place where they're going to get that directly. So it's kind of a big deal here. And then there also could be examples that your teacher can bring up about how you've taken something that you've learned in class and you have applied it to an activity or a passion outside of the classroom. But you don't need your science teacher to be talking about your athletic engagements unless it's something along the lines of, I know that they have a really busy schedule and they do a great job time managing, and their work is always exceptional in my class and on time. And I know that they're spending hours doing their sport outside of school, but it's not like, and then they went and played at this tournament and they won this award. That's not what the teacher letter is going to be focusing on. Okay, so on this slide, on the previous slide, I had mentioned ratings and how a teacher might rate you. So these are some examples of how a teacher might view you or what they might speak about in their letter of recommendation about you. And I think this is important for students to be aware of. So there's an academic portion, and then there's a personal and character portion. So for academic achievement, intellectual promise, quality of thought, of writing, creative thought, discussion, faculty respect, disciplined habits, and maturity. Now, you might not realize that this is something that they're passively observing of you throughout the school year. So they don't have to, I don't know, have an interview with you to understand if you've demonstrated maturity, or do you have disciplined habits? So are you on time to class? Do you send an email if you know you're going to miss to ask for work in advance? Those types of things, that falls under these categories, and your teachers are always sort of picking that up as they work with you throughout a school year. And then for the personal and character portion, your motivation, your leadership, integrity, reaction to setbacks, concern for others, self-confidence, initiative, and then just sort of an overall evaluation. And again, they might not have been able to see every single one of those things, but they hopefully have seen a few and are able to write about it in your letter. And in another slide or two, I'm going to talk about some optional information you can provide your teacher if they don't ask for specific information. And some of the optional information you can provide them would be examples of these areas. So how have you demonstrated creative thought academically, or how do you perceive your own maturity in that specific class? Because they might not know how you've built out your schedule. They just know that you've done really well. So you can help them fill in these question marks by giving them some concrete and specific examples that then they can use in their letter of recommendation on your behalf. And then same for personal and character. So integrity specific to their class. So, I know I could have taken a shortcut here, but I really was interested in it. And I went above and beyond and researched further. Or I noticed a friend was really struggling and I went out of my way to offer to buddy up and do some study sessions with them. They might not know that unless you tell them. And so that's where you can give examples that they can use in their letter. Okay. So next up, we're going to talk about the timeline and also the nuts and bolts of how to do this. So after you've brainstormed and you've decided which 2 teachers you want to ask, I highly recommend that you set up a one-to-one meeting with that teacher. So you can email them and say, hey, do you have 5 minutes sometime this week for us just to chat one-on-one? Or maybe you can go to office hours and you can ask if you could have a meeting with them one-to-one, or if it's empty, ask if now is a good time to chat. And you want to try to do this as in person as possible. And if we're still virtual, that's fine. But I would say it's not ideal to just ask by email. And then when you see them, just say, I was hoping that you would consider writing a letter of recommendation, a college letter of recommendation on my behalf. And then you stop talking, and the teacher will respond in one of many different ways. They might automatically say, yes, absolutely, I would love to write on your behalf. And that's great. They might respond and say, actually, here's my policies or procedures. I would like students to ask me on this date after they've filled out these forms or they've taken these steps. Make sure you have a pen or pencil nearby so you can take notes on what they say, so that way you don't forget, because it can be sort of a lot of adrenaline when you're asking for something like this. And then if they say, no, I'm so sorry, I'm not able to write a letter of recommendation for you, don't take it personally. There's a million reasons why a teacher might not feel they're able to write a letter of recommendation. And a lot of it might be something going on in their own personal life. But the truth is, you do not want somebody agreeing to write your letter who, for whatever reason, cannot write the best letter or has other things going on where they're just not able to. So don't take it personally. Regardless of the answer, thank them for considering or agreeing to write your letter. And then just follow what they tell you and don't make assumptions. So you want to ask them, when would you like me to get this information back to you? Or do you have some kind of form or documents that you want me to fill out before you write the letter for me? All of that kind of timeline stuff, you want to make sure that you're really clear on, and then you want to put it in your calendar and make sure that you follow up, because again, you following up with what they're asking goes to that character rating of maturity, time management, all of that. So how you handle this process also can impact how they write your letter in a good way, where they can say, oh, they were so polite and professional and just did everything I asked for, how I wanted it, with lots of advance notice, which gives them time to write the very best letter on their schedule. And then at the very bottom of this slide, I just always want to emphasize that you want to thank your recommenders next year. It takes a few hours for each teacher to write a letter for each student that they write for. And they do this because they care and they want you to have all of the opportunities available to you. A simple thank you goes so far. So whether it be a card or an email or you drop by their classroom, make sure that you do that. And then in the second semester, you're right now, current seniors are got their college decisions, their results are out, and they're making decisions on where they're going to go. Nothing feels better to a recommender than hearing from a student that they wrote for and saying, I just want to thank you again. I've decided to attend this university, or I'm debating between these 3 universities, and I know your letter really had an impact, which it does. So keep them posted and let them know where you're planning on enrolling for your fall of after high school. Okay, so just some letters of recommendation resources. As I mentioned, some teachers will have a packet or a form or a Google Doc for you to complete. And they'll tell you right at the beginning, like, I want you to complete this for me, and you just need to be clear on when you need to get that done. But what I'm going to tell you is the more thoughtful and specific and authentic you are in whatever documentation you provide your teacher, the better your letter is going to be. So if you are talking about a very specific project, what about that project did you really like? Or what did you learn about yourself or others through the experience? It's okay to share if something was challenging or if something worked out surprisingly well. And that's where the authenticity comes through. So it's not just summarizing what it was. The teacher knows what the assignment was or what the project is, but it's really showing what you got out of it, and how you processed through that work. And that's just one example, but in each question that they might be asking, you want to be thoughtful, specific, and authentic, and it will help them, and it will make your letter more unique and specific and powerful. And then below that, if your teacher doesn't have a form, consider filling this one out. So there's a letter of recommendation questionnaire, and you want to do that for each teacher. It asks things like, what class did I teach you in? And then same things. What were some of your favorite projects? What did you learn? What were high points? Things like that. And then after you have a conversation with the teacher and they say yes, you can request them in Naviance as a recommender. And I am going to send out an email to 11th graders later this week with more specific details on how you actually can do that in Naviance. But it requires that you have at least one school on your applying list, and then you'll be able to request the 2 teachers that you have asked and have said yes, but you do not want to, you do not request teachers through Naviance unless you've had that conversation. Otherwise, they'll just kind of cancel your request. You need to have the one-to-one conversation first. And another reminder over here on the right, the student saying, Naviance, I'm so happy that I've been using you. So if you have been following along the workshop Wednesdays, we've been talking about activities that you can be doing in Naviance sort of each month. By this point, hopefully you've been on a few times, you've completed some of those self-assessments in Naviance. You've added something to your resume, either in Naviance or on a Google Doc, and linked it into Naviance. Activities list is something you're going to need to do for college applications and for scholarships, and possibly for your teachers as well, and counselor as well. And then you'll have to have added some colleges to your list after attending virtual fairs or researching in order to then request a teacher letter of recommendation. So all of these things are building on one another. And again, if you feel like you missed a couple things, you can go back and watch the recordings from previous workshop Wednesdays and catch back up. But now is the time, and spring break is right ahead of us. Okay, so just a quick review on Naviance. When you log on, this is the homepage. And so up at the top bar, you can see there's colleges, careers, about me. So you can click up here and go to colleges I'm thinking about, colleges I'm applying to. That's also where you can manage your letters of recommendation from teachers. Careers, that's where you can, let's say you've decided that you want to major in something, or you know what career you want to do, you can add that there. And then under About Me, that's where you can take those self-assessments that your counselors and others have encouraged you to take to get more insight. It will also help you with your essay writing process if you have some idea of what you are interested in and why you're interested in it and what you plan to do with it. Okay, and then if you want to run a college search under that same colleges tab, we recommend going to advanced college search. This is a non-sponsored, so there's no ranked priority. If a college pays a little bit more money, they get higher ranked. This is a non-biased college research way to do this. And you can filter by different criteria, region, admit rate, and then you can look at scattergrams to see historical admits from Mountain View and Los Altos high schools respectively. You can add that college to a prospective list. You can also, if you're 100% sure you think you're going to apply it to your applying list, you can always remove those until we change that in the fall. So you can't do anything wrong with adding things to your college list right now. The only thing you can do wrong is not adding any. But if you add schools, that's ideal. So that's perfect. And then here's just an image of what that advanced college search looks like and the different filter tabs that you can apply. Okay, so next workshop Wednesday, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's going to be all about summer planning, and we'll also discuss for juniors possibly what our summer boot camps will look like, or one-to-one college advising sessions, so you can see what we'll have available, but then also what you might be doing with your summer as far as getting a job or doing a summer program, getting involved in your community, and Ms. Yazdani will be leading that. Another reminder, we have both the Mountain View and Los Altos Google Sites, and these Google Sites have a ton of information on there. So if you haven't been on recently or you've never been there, please take a look. We've been adding stuff as we get more information, and we think it will be helpful to you. So with that, I'm going to stop recording and we'll open it up for Q&A.